Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to go back to the 90s and review a little movie called Scream, which came out in 1996 around Christmas time and went on to become a huge hit. And it really gave an adrenaline shot to the horror genre. And the 90s was not a good decade for horror, especially the slasher part of horror. By that point, the Friday the 13th movies and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the box office returns were diminishing. Halloween was on a hiatus from after part 5 in 89, didn't have another movie till 95, and that was part 6 made money but wasn't a huge hit. And then obviously Wes Craven made New Nightmare in the 90s, which was great, but unfortunately the box office returns weren't there. There's some really good movies in the 90s that were overlooked. Exorcist 3, In the Mouth of Madness is great. John Carpenter's Vampires, but it wasn't really until 96 when Scream hit. It really gave an adrenaline shot to the horror genre. Spotted a ton of imitators. I Know What You Did Last Summer came out a year after, I believe, or not too long after, Urban Legend. And then even Halloween H2O that came out in 97. Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream, wrote Halloween H2O along with some other writers. And if you've ever seen H2O, Scream's fingerprints are all over it. Just the dialogue and even scenes from part 2 make it into the movie in H2O. But we're talking about Scream here. When Scream starts off, stars Drew Barrymore, Neve Campbell, Matthew Lillard, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, Jamie Kennedy. And it starts off with Drew Barrymore's character, home alone, her house in the country. Her parents are gone. She's waiting for her boyfriend to come over to watch a scary movie, and she starts receiving phone calls. And at first they start off polite, and then they devolve into basically harassment and terror. And then all of a sudden this killer shows up, and it doesn't end well for Drew Barrymore. But that opening scene, when I saw the movie, I didn't see this until the summer after it came out. So I saw it in the summer of 97. Early in the summer. It was still playing. It was in a drive-in theater where I grew up and I was living at the time. We had three drive-in theaters within a half hour of us. And I remember a couple of friends of mine and me went to see it because we all heard how great this movie was. Everybody was talking about it that year. So we went to see it, and that opening scene is very tense, very well shot, which you'd expect from Wes Craven. Very well acted, and it's one of the best horror openings of all time. Definitely top 10. And then the movie it's just a mystery. Who's doing these killings? This little small town in California had a murder a year earlier, and here we find out that it was Neve Campbell's mother was killed very brutally the year before. And almost to the anniversary date of that murder, these murders start up. And the cops have no leads, and they don't know who's doing it. And then eventually as the movie moves forward, we're following these bunch of high school kids that are friends, and there's some red herrings here and there. You think some people are the killer, it turns out they're not, and blah, so on and so forth. It's a mystery, and people get killed along the way, obviously. And then at the end, when the killers were revealed, when I first saw it, I was surprised. I didn't see it coming. Obviously, in subsequent viewings and through the years, watching it now, you could see it coming, but obviously I know now. But, you could see there's little telltale signs that it might be, certain person or people that are the ones that are doing all this terrorizing of the town. But the movie is very well acted. It's very well directed. The script is tight. There's great dialogue. It pokes fun at horror, but also embraces it. So it's not a parody in any way. They reference horror left and right. Horror movies like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they reference them all pretty much. But mostly Halloween. Halloween was Kevin Williamson's inspiration, pretty much. And even scenes of that movie make it into the Scream one. There's a party later on, and the kids are all sitting around watching Halloween. But it's just a great movie if you haven't seen it. If you're a horror fan and you're my age, I know you definitely have seen it. It's a popular movie. It's considered a classic at this point. I would highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, check it out again. I just watched it last night with my wife, and it still holds up very well. I would give it a 9 out of 10. It's definitely one of Wes Craven's best movies, along with the Nightmare on Elm Street, New Nightmare, and movies like that. Wes Craven had a long career. Obviously, God rest his soul. He passed away a year or so ago. And I mean, he started his career off with the Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. And he's always had hit movies here or there, ones that are considered classics. I mean, he's had a lot of duds too, but even my favorite director, John Carpenter, has a lot of great movies, but he also has a couple that aren't so good. But when they hit good, and Scream was definitely a huge hit for Wes. I mean, they went on to make 2 and 3 and then 4 eventually. And then he got to make Cursed as well, the werewolf movie that got butchered by the studio. But I'd highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a fun movie. And then check out the other, part 2 is really good. I enjoy part 2. Part 3's okay. It's not as good as the first 2, but it's good. I really like 4 though. I think 4 is really well done. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you like what you saw, click on the subscribe button down below and leave a comment. Tell me if you've seen Scream, what you think of it, what's your history with it. It's definitely a fun movie, and it brought horror back to the forefront, made it profitable again. And it definitely is an important movie to bring horror back in a big way in the 90s. So that's all for today. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.